What's up, everybody? Couch Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Overwatch video. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down the definitive Overwatch 2 patch 1.0 tier list. And you might be asking, Mills, how do you know what characters are actually busted? How do you know it's the definitive tier list if you're playing mainly quick play up against a wide variety of skill? And to that I say, don't question me. This is exactly what is good and bad. I'm just kidding. We're going to be breaking it down. Of course, things are subject to change, but these are my initial impressions after playing a lot of Overwatch 2. So if you want to know what characters to play and what characters to avoid, let's jump right in. Of course, the GameLeap website's the best place to absolutely pop off. We're going to be doing a revisit to the website from the ground up. So if you want to get a leg up on your competition, do yourself a favor and go check it out right now down below. Now, before we jump right in, of course, S tier are going to be the best of the best characters that are most likely going to define the meta as we know it. And then D tier is going to be characters that are just pretty trash and you might either want to avoid or you're going to have some hard time getting value out of those characters. First up, let's talk about Ana. Ana is actually really strong here. Specifically, the fact that she has that passive heal. As someone who mained Ana and was primarily an Ana player for a while, I will say that having that passive heal, if you don't take damage after a second, means that you can be super aggressive with grenades. That aggressive type of Ana is the type of Ana I love to play. I've always loved to play, and it's almost like it's enabled here. And the only downside to Ana is that there's a lot of things after you. The dive's very common. Genji's, Tracers, there are characters that are going to be after you. And of course, her sleep got actually increased. The cooldown got increased from 12 to 15 seconds. But even considering all of that, I still think that she's A. A lot of characters you could combo Nano with, and she has that capability to carry a game on her back, so I'm putting her in the A tier. Baptiste. Baptiste is interesting. I think that he actually works a lot worse without that second tank. He works way better in the second tank meta, so I'm putting them here. While you can play a much more aggressive style of Baptiste, and Immortality Field's still really strong, it doesn't get the same level of value that it did before, and I'm kind of struggling between C and B, but for now, I'm going to keep him in the C tier. Bastion. Bastion also ends up in the C tier, right next to Baptiste. He's powerful, and because you can actually pop over rooftops and flank, there's a lot of surprise factor. The problem with Bastion is that compared to some of the other options, he doesn't have the necessary mobility, and he's too big of a hitbox. So there's not really much of a reason to play him over something like Soldier, who has that mobility, small hitbox, and has a self-heal. Bastion is fun, and he's really cool, and I like the direction that they brought him in, but he's not oppressive, and he's not really that strong in the compositions that I do see play. So for now, he's going to be in that C tier. Next up, we do got to talk about Brig. I think Brig's actually pretty strong. Brig's in the B tier. Brig doesn't have a stun anymore, but she is going to be able to sustain your team up a lot. She has extra damage with her bash, triggers her inspire. Really strong character, and I think that she works really well with a character like Ana. And of course, you could even play her in a composition where you're trying to rush people down, maybe with a Lucio. I'm going to put her right here in the B tier for now. Doomfist. Doomfist is a character that got turned into a tank, and I was very skeptical when it happened. But now that it's here, I love the design. That being said, he's incredibly powerful. In fact, I'm putting him in the S tier. This one might be a little controversial, but when you play the game, you'll understand exactly why I put him up this high. I think he is insanely powerful as a freaking tank, especially when you put him in the hands of a Doomfist that knows how to bounce off of objects and, you know, gets very creative with the rollouts involved. Doomfist is a character that is very hard to kill. Sure, he does less damage, like a lot less damage, but you have a Tracer or a Genji following up what you're doing, and you're like a Doomfist that can never die. You're not going to fly in and kill 3 people, but you are going to create a ton of space for your team, and I can see a ton of compositions centered around a Doomfist initiator, and for that, I'm putting him in the S tier. Now, not to do this back to back, but I actually am putting D.Va in the S tier as well. Now, D.Va hardly got any changes. In fact, she got slightly nerfed going into this, but because of the way that the meta has changed, D.Va is looking better than ever. There are so many characters that she really shuts down very well, whether it's freaking Soldier, whether it's McCree, Pharah, Hanzo, Ashe. She's just really insane, and she can get tons of value eating abilities, peeling, and even hunting down characters. The fact that she does so much damage and she can peel, there's a lot to love about her. And of course, as an added benefit, of course, her ultimate is even better, less shields. I think that she is going to be one of the best characters, and I would be very surprised if she doesn't just completely take over pro play. Next up, we do got to talk about Echo. Echo is strong, but I think that she suffers a little bit in here compared to, you know, specifically the old meta in which she was played in. She was better at poking than a character like Genji. She had a more powerful ult than a character like Genji. But now, when you compare her directly to some of the DPS that are being played, it's hard to play her against really good McCrees, Tracers, and you're not going to spam as much. Plus, she did receive some pretty substantial nerfs. When you Echo, duplicate a target, you can only go up to a max of 300. So if you copy a Rhine, you're only going to end up as a 300 HP Rhine. So that's pretty big. That's a pretty big change. And honestly, I might even put her down to C tier after I get my hands on her for a little bit longer. Next up is Genji. And as someone who was a diehard Genji main, Genji is the first character that I got to Grandmaster with. He was my true love before I, you know, realized how bad he was after I spent, you know, thousands of hours with him. I am almost hesitant to say that he's so freaking good right now. He is very, very strong. When players are playing characters that he has legitimate great matchups against, he gets value with his reflect. He can reflect McCree's new magnetic grenade. He can reflect Sojourn's freaking graviton surge thing. Of course, he's really good against characters like Zen, characters like Ana. And I do think that Dive is very strong right now with CC at an all-time low. Genji is in a really strange spot where you can actually get value out of just a blade. You don't need Nano Blade. You're not going to get stunned to hell on Genji. You can actually just get value out of Blade, but here's the downside, and the reason that I'm not putting Genji in the S tier. It's very hard to build Blade. You're building it very slow. Any tank that you're dealing damage to is already only giving you 70% of the ult charge, but if you actually, you know, want to farm your Blade fast, you only have one tank to do it with. So it's a lot less. Genji is still very strong and has a lot of great 1v1 matchups, but even though his Blade is more powerful, you're going to get it far, far less. So all in all, I would say that Genji is actually in that A tier, but we're gonna have to wait and see. I think that like a Genji Doomfist Tracer dive might be freaking ridiculous, but you know, for now, I'm gonna put him in the A tier and hope and pray that he holds up. Next up, we have to talk about Wrecking Ball. And Wrecking Ball is an interesting one because in a lot of ways, Doomfist kind of does something similar. I think that Wrecking Ball is still strong and he's still very hard to kill. Like, he's actually ridiculously hard to kill. And I want to put him in the A tier. I think it's between the A and the B tier. I would say for now, I'm going to put him in the B tier. And one of the biggest reasons I think that Wrecking Ball is kept in check is Sombra. And we'll get to Sombra a little bit later, but she keeps a lot of ridiculously strong characters that basically need a stun to shut them down, but there is no stun. She keeps them in check. So yeah, we'll talk about her later. Next up, I got to talk about Hanzo. I'm actually going to put Hanzo at the top of B. Hanzo did get a slight nerf to a Storm Arrow, and I do think that Hanzo's pretty strong. The unfortunate thing about Hanzo is he's not that great when he's getting dove by a whole bunch of characters. He gets shut down by Diva. He's not great against divers like Genji being like coordinated dives. And if you give your Hanzo the resources and he hits the shots, of course he can pop off. But I don't necessarily think that he is as strong as some of the other options. So for now, I'm putting him in the B. He might deserve A, but for now, I'm putting him in the B. Next up is Junkrat. Junkrat is actually our first D tier candidate. Junkrat doesn't work very well in the current way that the game is played. Characters are going really sporadic, spreading out. Like if you even think about the map like Temple of Anubis, for instance, you don't really need to route a certain direction with your tanks. You have a Diva, he can go straight over. Doomfist can go wherever. You never need to route to the left side. It's very hard to control the pathing. And Junkrat's all about, you know, area denial, right? But when the enemy team can kind of go whatever area they want to, it's hard for him to get guaranteed value. I'm not saying he's unplayable. It really is probably going to be map specific and very parts of the map specifically you could play Junkrat, but it's still going to be hard to get value out of him. Next up, we do got to talk about Lucio. And Lucio is interesting because I think he's either S or A. He could be specifically A because you could say, hey, he's a little bit weaker because you don't have these double tank brawl compositions that want to get in. That being said, I still think he enables characters like McCree, characters like Reaper, characters like Rhine. And even without that, you can play him in a dive composition, and he provides a very valuable defensive ult, which is needed for a lot of these ultimates that are popping out. I will actually put him in the S tier. He's a lot easier to stay alive than a character like Zen, and he has that defensive ultimate. So for those reasons, I'm putting him in the S tier. Next up, I gotta talk about Mei. Mei, I'm actually gonna put at the top of C tier. I think that she's okay. She doesn't get as much wall value anymore because you're not gonna wall off a tank and a choke as easily. And she's a lot better against like compositions that really want to get in, like a brawl composition, for instance. But because she's slow, she's good against some of these characters that you have a hard time dealing with because she instantly slows. So you could slow a Hammond or slow a Doomfist. So for those reasons, I think she's a good fold to those characters. And I think as like an anti-meta pick, I'm going to put her at the top of C tier. Next up is Mercy. I think Mercy is actually pretty good. There's some characters that she could pocket pretty well. She could pocket a character like Hanzo. She could pocket an Echo. She can really, you know, go and fly around a battlefield in a dive composition. That mobility is king. And of course, she did get a buff where now she gets more healing. She gets much faster passive healing if she doesn't take damage than her counterparts. So for those reasons, I'm actually putting her in the B tier. Next up, we got to talk about Mora, and Mora is actually doing really well right now. She's pretty strong. I don't know if A is too strong. Maybe B might be better, but the initial thoughts are kind of that Mora is really good. She can, you know, be that hybrid, and you're going to see this a lot where there's a big crossover between the roles. You don't want to just be only a support or only a tank. You want to be like a tank DPS or support. It's like everyone's a DPS, right? But some characters do a little bit other things. And Mora can be that DPS. She can, you know, help to peel. If a Genji dives onto a target, she can peel out that person with the heal orb and then zap the Genji, for instance. Or, you know, she really has that mobility so she can fly around the battlefield and she's hard to dive herself. I think that maybe this is a little bit of an overestimate, but the more I think about it, the more I think that Mora is going to be really, really strong, especially at the beginning right now in the beta. I would highly suggest trying her out. Next up, we got to talk about Ashe, and Ashe, I'm putting in the A tier. I think Ashe is really strong. I think that she's similar to Hanzo in a lot of ways, but specifically her ultimate is a lot better, especially the fact that there's very little shields. Bob is actually kind of oppressive in some situations. He can get a lot more value than he used to be able to. Even though he did actually receive a slight nerf in his health, he's still very, very strong. And Ashe has always been a strong pick. Overall, between the consistent AoE damage from her dynamite and, of course, the movement ability plus her ultimate, I'm putting her in the A tier. Next up is Cassidy. And Cassidy is a strange one. I want to put him in the A. I've been playing him probably more than almost any character, but if I'm being honest with myself, I think I need to put him at the top of B. Now, there are several reasons for this, but here's the thing that you need to think about when you play Cassidy. He is not the Cassidy that you remember. In fact, I think it's best to like think of the old version of him as McCree, and this is Cassidy, because he does not do what he used to do. He does not counter what he used to counter. There are combos that you can do. If you hit someone in the body from really close range, it's going to do 70. If you hit someone with that magnetic grenade, if it sticks to them, you have to be pretty accurate. It's going to do 134, I believe is the damage. 134 or 131, one of the two. You're going to be able to kill people. No, it's 131. You're going to be able to kill people just with the body shot plus the magnetic grenade. So you do a lot of damage, right? But you don't have a stun. And that's the problem. When characters like Doomfist are flying in, when characters like Hammond are flying in, you feel useless in a way that you never felt before. And, you know, the Tracer matchup, honestly, was already in Tracer's favor when you got to a certain level of skill. Now it's completely lopsided. I know, sure, you can hit her with that magnetic grenade and shoot her, but you cannot stun her. And it's very difficult to shut down some of these divers without the stun. McCree does a lot of consistent damage, but he's more similar to a character like Ashe or Hanzo now, and he's not a unique stun CC machine because he doesn't have that stun anymore. So he doesn't fill the same role, and he doesn't counter the same characters. When I go up against a freaking hog as a McCree, I cry because there's nothing I can do. Or a wrecking ball. I'm just shooting this motherfucker non-stop. Even a Doomfist. I sure if he freaking armors up, I can hit him with the magnetic grenade. And while McCree still can pop off if you hit your shots and you're really good and you position well, and of course you can output even more damage than before with that magnetic grenade, he is not an anti-dive CC machine anymore. Very different. So you need to think about him as a completely different character. And there's not really that many hard counters to a lot of these divers anymore. Next up, we got to talk about Orisa. And I actually almost want to put Orisa in the S tier. I'm going to put her at the top of A tier. She's nuts. She is absolutely ridiculous. Her javelin, the ability for you to stun an enemy into the wall, peel from distance, or just follow it up with the actual javelin spinny freaking attack that actually allows you to potentially kill a 200 HP target from full HP. You could javelin them into the wall and then spin attack them. You combine that with her ultimate that is really good AoE. You combine that with the fact that she has a good shield. She's a really great solo tank and she provides a lot for the team. I think she's really, really powerful. And yeah, she's just so much more fun to play, so much more interesting to play. I would highly suggest you try her out. Next up, we got to talk about Pharah. Pharah's going to be kind of map situational. I think she's still all right. I'm going to put her in the B tier. It's going to be mainly Koth maps is where she's going to thrive. But of course, there's going to be maps where Pharah is going to be good on certain parts of it. It really depends also on how good the hit scan players you're up against. Like, I wouldn't want to play Pharah into a pocketed Ashe that's decent. But of course, in certain situations, you can get some value out of her. Reaper's actually really good. I actually really think that Reaper's strong. He's going to go into the B tier. Maybe A. Nah, B. Let's put him in B. Now, keep in mind that they actually reduced his damage. If they didn't reduce his damage, I would easily put him in the A, and it's actually noticeably felt. But I think they needed to do that because without the CC to keep him in check, he is kind of a menace. He just goes in and he can kill people and then yeet away. So that's something to keep in mind. Reaper really opens up when there's not a lot of stuns and there's not a lot of ways to shut him down. And of course, even the tanks that do have the CC, they are already at a disadvantage up against the Reaper. Next up, we got to talk about Reinhardt. I'm actually going to put Reinhardt up in the A tier. Reinhardt's really good. He's really strong. Shatter is just, you know, fight winning. 2 fire strikes. The fact that you can cancel your charge. The fact that you can, you know, really veer very, very much more. It's 50% more steering while you're charging. And you get your charges faster. So there's a lot more individual play to the character. And I think that he has the capability to really carry fights. I don't necessarily think that built as well for single tank as a character like Orisa is or Doom, but he's still very strong. And I could definitely see a ton of compositions based around Orion and perhaps a Lucio. Next up, we got to talk about Hog. I want to put Hog in like the C or D. I'm going to put him in the D, actually. He's pretty weak. And maybe I'm a little bit biased because I keep seeing him, you know, his breather get canceled by a freaking Doomfist. I keep seeing his hogs get, you know, I mean, I keep seeing his hooks get freaking blocked by a Diva DM. I keep seeing him getting naded over and over again, slept, and yeah, he's having a hard time. Of course, if you're a god tier hooker, then you can hook a freaking Genji behind you and a Tracer in Africa, then sure. But he is, you know, having a rough time as a solo tank by himself. He's a big blob. Yeah, it's a hard day out there for hog mains. Next up is Sigma. Sigma's actually pretty good. I'm going to put him in the B tier. I don't think he's to the tier of Orisa and Rhine, but he's still pretty strong. There's a lot of carry potential on the character. He is pretty difficult to play, of course, as always. I'm actually going to put him a little bit lower than this. Let's move some of this around a little bit. Maybe like that. That's probably wrong. It doesn't matter. Sigma's pretty decent. His ultimate is powerful, and the fact that enemies can't leave his ultimate is actually really good now. So I'm going to put him in the B tier. I think it's pretty good. Next up is Sojourn. Sojourn's actually really strong. Really strong, and I think when players master her, she's just going to get nuts. I mean, the ray gun, the fact that you can one-shot headshot players means that you could completely carry fights. You have mobility straight up to the high ground and mobility to just get out of situations. You have something that sucks in players that you can use to prevent players from pushing, turn the tables on players, or even soft combo with some of your allies. And all in all, I'm actually going to put her in the A tier. I think that she's just as strong as Ashe is, and she's really, really good. Now, Soldier is another story altogether, and I'm putting Soldier all the way in the S tier. Soldier's great. A lot of people have already been saying this, but it's true. Soldier just works really well in the way that the game is being played right now, which is very deathmatchy, very fraggy, very almost selfish. And you can heal yourself. You have mobility. You can run around the map. You can burst people down. 6-second cooldown on your Helix is crazy. And the fact that Soldier did all that damage, of course, before when there was like this shield meta, he sucked. But now things are opened up. He's really great at 1v1ing a lot of the duelist characters in the game. I think he's far better now at dealing with a Tracer, for instance, or a Genji than McCree is. And it's not even close. He's actually the best hit scan character. If you want to shut down these divers, he's just better. He has the capability to one-shot them, run away, heal, turn and fight. He has so many options. And I'm putting him in the S tier for sure. I think he's really great. Now, this is the last character I believe I'm putting in the S tier. I think it's the last character. It's Sombra, man. Sombra's nuts. Sombra's fantastic. Now, her hack only lasts for 1 second, but you can hack while you are invis. Yeah, that's crazy. On top of that, her EMP instantly does 40 damage to everyone it hits. What? So all you have to do, basically, is pop her EMP, and then focus the target that has the ultimate that you want to get off the board the most. Because you gotta realize if the enemy are popping, like, rocking, like, 4 ultimates, you pop your EMP. If you don't kill anyone in that 1 second interval, they're gonna all pop their ultimates, and you might just lose the fight anyways. But if you can focus the one person, you know, that one Zen, then it doesn't matter if they pop their ultimates. They already took that 40 damage. They're already, you know, being focused by your team. Of course, your entire team gets to see them for 8 seconds. So, you know, all in all, I think that Sombra's just nuts. And of course, she's really great at shutting down some of the top annoying characters in the game, whether that's Doomfist, whether that's Wrecking Ball. And with much less CC, having a hack ability is just kind of needed against a lot of those characters, and she's very, very strong. Next up is Symmetra. Symmetra's okay. The problem is, you know, her turrets and just the way that she's played with Teleporter work better in a 6v6 with 2 tanks. It's much worse in this environment, and I'm actually going to put her all the way down in the D tier. I don't think she's very good. She doesn't build up charge very easily, and I actually think that there's some aspects of her kit that I think should probably be reworked, honestly, to fit better in Overwatch 2, because she was built for an Overwatch 1 double shield meta world, and that's just no longer the case. Torbjorn is going to be at the top of C tier. I could almost put him in B tier, but the B tier is getting mad stacked, so you could imagine him at the bottom of B tier if it makes you sleep at night, or helps you sleep at night. Torb is really, really okay. He doesn't really have, you know, a lot of great compositions to play with. There's not really this bunker composition or a spam composition that exists anymore, and it probably will never exist based on just there being only 1 tank. And he's okay against some of these divers, but he's not great. He's still fat. He has a huge hitbox. I think that, unfortunately, Torb is just not really benefiting that much from 5v5. Now, next up is Tracer. This is another character that I kind of want to put in an S tier. I'm making this S tier kind of stacked, right? This is the perfect comp, right? Oh no, I guess I need one more support. I'm actually going to put her at the top of A tier. I'm tempted to put her in the S tier, but I can't put that many DPS in the S tier, I don't think. I think 2's enough. And she's at the top of A because Tracer's kind of unleashed. Now, she did get a damage nerf, and she needed it because she's nuts. There's not any stuns that will shut her down. You need to insta-kill her. And there are characters that can do it. Of course, the Ray Gun on Sojourn, Ashe. McCree can now, you know, shoot her once and hit her with a magnetic grenade. Hanzo can headshot her, whatever. Tracers that are good are going to find a way around all those things. And there's just not a really reliable way to shut down a Tracer besides maybe Sombra. And Sombra's a pretty good counter to her because you could stay in Viz, you can find the Tracer, and you can just hack her and then potentially kill her. But that being said, Tracers have the capability to carry like no other. There aren't, you know, that level, that armor. That's another thing that happened is now any excess armor doesn't change it by -5 per pellet. It actually just does a flat 30% less, regardless of how the damage is dealt. So Tracer is going to do just fine in that situation. On top of that, there is so much less CC for this character that Tracer is just kind of left to run wild. And of course, she's the god of 1v1 matchups. So you put all those together, what do you get? You get a freaking psycho character that is very hard to kill. And I think that the best 2 characters in the game against her right now are Sombra and Soldier. Next up is Widowmaker. Widowmaker I'm going to put in the B tier. Widowmaker is having a rough time in this meta because there's so many goddamn divers. Luckily for her, she got changed up to 200 HP again, which is nice. I think that Widowmaker mains are going to like that. And of course, Widowmaker's a character that will work if you got the skill to back her up. She's going to scale heavily with your skill level. The high tiers of skill, she's going to be better and better. But just in general, there's a lot of characters that can come after you. If you're a Widowmaker that's popping off, just prepare for the entire kitchen sink to be deployed on you. And yeah, just be ready. You can still pop off, but be ready. Next up is Winston. Winston is a little bit strange. I don't really think that he's actually that good. I'm gonna put him at the bottom of B. I know B is stacked, but that's kind of what's going on right now. A lot of things are just mid. A lot of characters are just mid. But he's at the bottom of B, and maybe I just move like this up here. Probably, maybe, I don't know. Whatever. I'm just gonna put him like this. Y'all can rearrange him as you wish. But it's true that he's at the bottom of B because he's a little bit worse than some of the other options. I mean, he doesn't peel very well, unlike D.Va. He doesn't create as much space as a character like Doomfist does. And all in all, I think that he's lacking a little bit. I would like to see a slight buff to potentially his long-range fire. I will say the Primal Rage on his kit is very, very strong now. That's why they made it 50% harder to actually earn. And in a world where you play with a lot of divers or the enemy's playing, you know, dive-v-dive, he could be pretty decent at dealing with some of these divers or diving in with them. But we'll have to wait and see where he moves. This is the one character that I'm not entirely sure. I think he can move up or down depending on who is playing him and what the coordination level is like for pro play. Next up, we do got to talk about Zarya. Zarya, I'm actually going to put in the A tier towards the top. Let's actually rearrange stuff kind of like this. Yeah, Zarya is cool. She's pretty strong. Double bubble is really nice. I will say that not having a secondary tank to bubble is a little rough for the character. You don't have someone true that you can enable. You don't even have like a Doomfist anymore to enable. You're primarily using it for yourself and for peel, which is okay. It's not optimal, but a fully charged Zarya can just kind of go nuts on the battlefield right now. So there's that. You can hard carry. If you are above the enemy in skill level, you could pop off and dominate. But at the end of the day, I don't think that Zarya is going to be the center of a ton of compositions for the meta. And for those reasons, I'm putting her only in the B tier, even though she's probably a god tier solo queue or solo carry comp or character to climb with. Now, last up is Zenyatta. And Zenyatta is going to be a controversial one probably, but I'm actually putting him pretty high up in the A tier. And let me tell you why. In the world of just a dually DPS, you know, environment, Zenyatta actually thrives rather than falls. While, sure, there's a million DPS that are after him, Zenyatta gets tons of value by potentially putting out a lot of damage, potentially killing some of his attackers, and just the longer you can stay alive as Zen, the more you're doing. You're doing so much. You also have a defensive ult that is really, really good against some of the key abilities in the game, like Genji Dragonblade, for instance. And all in all, I think that he works actually pretty well in a pseudo dive composition. Like, I could really easily see a very aggressive like Lucio Zen, Doomfist, Genji, Tracer, or Genji, or let's say like Tracer, Sombra dive composition. Something like that, that just does a lot of damage very quickly. And Zen might not have a lot of peel there, but what Zen does have is the ability to do a lot before he dies. That's one example. And of course, a Zen left unchecked is just going to dominate the fight. So I will say he is very, very strong, very, very powerful. Can be frustrating to play as him when there's so many divers, but at the end of the day, you can still pop off and just have tons of impact with him regardless. But this is my definitive tier list. I do think that my B tier is fucking way too stacked. Probably Cassidy could go up and maybe a couple characters could go down, but this is where I'm going to keep my tier list for now. And specifically, I am very, very curious what's going to happen fully in the Overwatch League. But definitely let me know what your experience is with Overwatch. Which of these characters are you excited to play? Which of these characters are you sad that they are low or happy that they are high? Let me know in the comments down below. And go to the GameLeap website if you want to pop off and absolutely dominate with in-depth tips, tricks, guides, and so much more. Do yourself a favor and go check it out right now down below.